So today we are going to be looking at the corner halving joint, a simple but effective way of joining two bits of wood at a right angle. So without further ado, let's get to it.
So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to decide upon our face edge and our face side. Now, this is very important when we're doing our corner halving joint, as we need to make sure that our parts stay the right way up when we're doing things. So I've had a little look around already, and I quite like the look of that for my face side, and we'll use this for our face edge. So what we're going to do is we're always going to reference off either this face or that face whenever we do any measurements. That way this will come out nice and accurate. Once we've done that, we want to start marking off the end of our wood, because there's no guarantee fresh off the saw that's going to be perfectly straight. So what we'll do is give ourselves a datum line that we're going to trust. You'll see when I use my tri-square there, I had it up against the side that I'd marked out to be my reference point before. So we'll take this down around the sides, again always marking from the same side. Okay, so I'm going to do the others one. There we go. So now that we've marked out the end of our wood and we know what our face side and our face edge is, we're going to turn actually allowing for the space for these parts to overlap each other. So I happen to know that the width of this piece of wood is 35mm wide. So I'm going to take my steel rule, and from my mark on the end, which I marked out last time out, I'm going to mark in 35mm. So make my mark there. And we can once again use our tri-square, making sure that we have it up against our face edge, and square that across the way. Okay, we can take this one down onto the other sides. We take this one down the sides as well. We've taken that across the top, down either side. We don't need to take it across the back because this top half is coming off of this piece of wood. Now, you could be tempted to go and do exactly the same thing on this next piece of wood, but we need to remember that it's not this side that's coming off this time. It is the back side, because the two are going to overlap each other to make up the full width of the wood when the joint is complete. So we're not going to use our face side this time for marking out. We're still going to use our face edge as a reference point, but we're going to come from this point here. So we said 35mm, let's go 35mm once more. And this time we remember that this is the side that's coming off. So when the two go together, like that. So now that we've figured out how wide we want our joints to be, we now need to figure out how deep we want our joints to be. This piece of wood is 18mm thick, so I need to come down 9mm from the surface on the top here. We're going to need a marking gauge for this. We could set this up using a ruler simply by measuring the distance between the top of the stock here and tip of the spike, setting that up to 9mm, and away we go. If you are in any doubt over how thick your wood is though, we can always use a different method to actually find exactly the middle. So if we want to find where the centre of a piece of wood is using only a marking gauge and no ruler, what we want to do is set this up to roughly the middle, come in from one side of the wood and make a mark. Okay, we've got a little dot there. Switch over to the other side of the wood and we're going to make another little mark. Now, if these two marks are in exactly the same place, then we already have the middle of the wood. Now, from what I can see, they're not quite exactly in a line with each other. They're close, but not quite there. So in my case, my marking gauge is slightly on the small side. So I need to give it a tiny tap in this direction. Check and see if that's in between the two dots, which I think it is. So let's just make another dot here. Switch over to the other side of the wood. And I can see that my marking gauge lines up with the hole that I made previously. So it's exactly the same distance from both sides. So that is now set to the middle. And that is how you can find the middle of a piece of wood without using a ruler. Check from one side, go to the other side and check again. If the dots are in the same place, you've got the middle. If they're slightly further apart, you just adjust until you're directly in between. When it comes to using your marking gauge, okay, if you're struggling to do this with it in your hands like I'm doing just now, stick your work in your vise, and that way you can have both hands onto your marking gauge like so, nice and steady, and that's not going to go anywhere you don't want it to. We must make sure that the flat surface of your stock there is up against the side of your wood, making sure that it is the face side that we're using, okay, and not the other side. Okay, and all we really want to do is make a light scratch here. Okay, we don't need to dig it all the way in and make a massive gouge in the wood. Just a light scratch, and then we'll go over it a few times. Okay, if you dig in too deep, what will happen is that the marking gauge will simply follow the grain of the wood, and it will take you away from your centre. So that's that done down that side there. We'll just mark over the top as well. Now this is tricky, so again, we just want to be making a light groove to start with, and then we'll see about digging a bit deeper. Okay, so once you've finished going around your wood with your marking gauge, what you might want to do, just to make your lines a little bit more obvious, is just run a pencil along it, just so it's easier for you to see where your line is. Because depending on the piece of wood that you're using, sometimes this can be a little bit hard to see. Okay, and that's our first part done. So in this case, we've marked from our face side, and this is the side we're going to be taking off. So when we switch to our other side, all we need to make sure is when we use our marking gauge, we're measuring from this side as well. So even if our middle's not quite perfect, the two will cancel each other out. And now for the fun bit. Now we get to cutting. Now there's a couple of different ways to actually cut your shoulders for your halving joint. We'll show you both of the ways that I would do it just now. Okay. First one we're going to do is a method called knifing and notching. So that is where we actually are going to cut along this line with either a knife or a sharp chisel, and then we're going to come in at an angle and make a little groove, and that groove is where our saw is going to sit. It's going to enable us to cut straight down, and it's give us a nice neat shoulder on here. Okay, so the way we do this is, firstly, let's just take our nice sharp chisel that we've got here, line that up perfectly with my line that I want to use. I'm just going to push down on it a little bit. Okay, there's no need to go and get a mallet for this one. We don't need to dive super deep into the wood here. We're just looking to make a little cut. Again, line it up perfectly on my line, and just kind of wiggle that down a little bit there. Just make sure it's of a decent enough depth. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to come around to this side of the wood, and we're just going to, again, just by hand, squeeze it in this way, and we're going to take out a little V groove. Okay, so what I've done is I've worked in from the edge just a little bit further back from where my line is, and dug in to where the mark that I made with the chisel was last time out. That's left us with a little groove here, and this groove is where our saw is going to sit. Okay, and that will enable our saw to stay in exactly the right place at all times. It should also give us a very nice sharp edge on this corner here. So now that we've got our little groove, we can rest our saw in there, start it out nice and easy, just nibble away at the back corner, slowly bring things down, making sure that we're not going to eat into that edge that we made. But now we've got a little bit of a groove. Follow your lines on the side, obviously, make sure that you're staying nice and straight. Keep an eye on where your lines are and make sure you don't go too far on both sides. Oops. And that's us down to our halfway line on both sides. Now, I'm going to set up something slightly different. I'm going to show you another way to cut your shoulders for your halving joint. You're still going to need a clamp, but we're going to do this the idiot-proof way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a scrap piece of wood, as long as the side is square to the back face there. We're going to place this on top of our joint. We're going to put that right up against our pencil line. Okay. We'll get our clamp kind of finger tight. Do any sort of adjustment so we can only just see the pencil mark and no more. Then we're going to tighten that right up so it's not going to go anywhere. And this is now going to serve as a guide for our saw. So our saw is going to cut exactly on the mark now. There's no chance of us going into the piece of wood that we're going to keep. Our waste wood is exposed, but that doesn't matter if that gets damaged. And this is going to guide us straight down into our cut. Just as before, we'll keep an eye on our marks on either side. I'm fairly happy with that, so that's that now done. We're going to take our clamp away, take our scrap wood away, and as you can see, that's us cut down to our halfway mark on both sides. Nice and straight, and inside of our waste wood as well. So I've set my wood up in my vise here at this 45-degree angle. We're going to remove this section of wood here. There's a reason I've set it up at 45 degrees. We're going to cut down from this angle here. Okay, this will allow us to actually look at both of these lines while we're cutting. So we'll make sure that we're cutting dead straight on both of these axes. Okay, we're then going to rotate things back the way and cut down the one remaining side that hasn't been cut yet. This will act as a guide so that when we cut straight down from the top, our saw will track along those grooves that we've already made, and we won't need to worry about the saw wandering off of the lines that we've made. Now, in my case, I like to just cut just a millimetre to the side, just a wee smidge away from the line, just in case something goes wrong. You can always save it. Okay, if you cut bang on the line and your saw cut goes a bit of astray, then you're stuck with that. You need to start again. Okay, but what I like to do is cut just a millimetre away, and then we'll tidy it up with the chisel once we're done. So let's take our tenon saw. I'm going to use my thumb as a bit of a fence here, just to line up my saw, just as I said, a millimetre away from the line. Let's pull that back to give ourselves a little bit of a groove to work with. Once we're settled into the wood, we want to keep an eye on this line and keep an eye on this line as we're cutting, and making sure we're tracking both lines nice and straight. Okay, you can kind of rock your saw forward to kind of see where it's going to go. Rock your saw back to see where it's going to go. And just keep nibbling away at that corner, following both the lines until you're confident that your saw is definitely going to track that dead straight. Once you are, you can set this up, cut 45 degrees across the way, and on we go. Looking good. Okay, so now that's both of these lines cut. We just need to get the other side, so we'll switch things around. Once again, I'll use my thumb just as a bit of a guide. We've got a bit of a groove from our previous cut though. And we're just going to keep an eye on this side now, making sure that follows our line nice and straight. Okay, that's looking good. So we can start to bring the saw back. It should follow some of the grooves that we've already made. There we go, so that's looking good. So we'll set this dead upright in our vise now. And all that's left is a little kind of triangle of wood that's still attached here. So what we're going to need to do is just bring that down from the top. And our saw should track the lines that we've already cut. So we have no worries about this going away from where we want it to be. And there we go, that's our cut complete. And it's quite tidy actually. We've got a nice flat surface here, nice and flat there. Had we cut bang on the line, this would have been just about perfect enough for us to throw together. But like I say, I like to leave this just a little bit proud, and then we can tidy it up with the chisel afterwards just to make sure it's 100% perfect. So we do the same trick with the other one. So we're going to start to get rid of the excess wood that we left from when we cut our 10-inch saw earlier on. We're going to use our chisel in order to do this. The way we're going to do this is just put this into our marks that we made with our marking gauge earlier on, and we're just going to let the chisel rise up out of the wood just now. We're just going to basically establish the lowest point that we want this to come down to. Not going to worry about cutting all the way across or anything like that just now. We're just establishing this edge. Okay, so that's our lowest point on this edge established. We're going to do the same from the end. Again, just find where our marking gauge took us to. Just work in the way, like so. So we'll do the same on the far side now. Just find our marking gauge mark. Let the chisel just come up the way, out of the wood, and just establish our lowest point. We don't want to make it any smaller than that. So we've got a little bit of a lump in the middle now. But all we need to do is work with our chisel and just taking the worst of that out. You can work in from the end of the wood. Just be careful that your chisel doesn't track the grain when you're doing this. Like I said before, we're not going anywhere near our edges anymore. Our edges are as low as we want them to be. So we're going to leave them there. We don't want to go any deeper. We're just going to work in this centre section. Just clearing out the worst of it just now, like this. And then we can work in from the edge and just shave off any extra little bits. And that is almost perfect now. So now that we've got our joints cleaned up there, you'll see that's looking quite nice, closing up very nicely. Our shoulders close up nicely as well. Nice and straight, no major gaps or anything like that going on there. That will be a nice and solid joint when we get it glued up. Now, here is your strengths and weaknesses of your corner halving joint. Good thing is it's nice and quick to do, it's nice and easy, it's straightforward enough. Problem is there's nothing other than glue holding this joint together. Okay, I can move this way, I can remove it that way, I can remove it that way. Any sort of force in any direction is only held together by glue. The good news is glue works best when it's side grain to side grain. There's a lot of side grain to side grain contact there when you put that together. The reason, for example, butt joints are really weak is because there's a whole load of end grain there. That's just going to soak up all your glue, and there's not going to be a great gluing surface between the two, and it's likely to break. Whereas this has a lot of side grain to side grain contact, so as long as you have a nice flat surface to glue to, that will be nice and strong once it's glued up. But like I say, there's nothing physically holding it in place other than glue. So nice, quick and easy to do, but it does require glue to actually hold it in place. So we've left this one to dry for a few hours now, and that's our joint pretty much complete. All it's left to do is to take care of these little overhangs that we've got left. Now if you've got a belt sander or something like that, this is dead easy to just shave that straight off. In my case, what I'm going to have to do is just chop the worst of this off with a coping saw and then go over it with a plane to make it nice and smooth. So let's go into our vise and let's get started. So I'm not looking to get right into the line with the coping saw, I'm just looking to take the worst of things off. I'm going to stay above my line. And just get the worst of the wood away. Then I'll switch it up to a plane. And we'll just start working our way in. Now, when we're going to plane across the grain, I always want to be working in the way towards the joint here, because if I work out the way, I run the risk of splitting the wood, whereas it's nice and supported on this end, so I can shave away that way without any issues. we go. That is now perfectly flat and smooth. Just got to do the same trick with the other side. And there you have it. One absolutely perfect corner halving joint.